Okay, so I think I'm going to go ahead and get started and begin our webinar. So as mentioned, I'm going to be going over phase 3 today, which covers advanced reports, your reporting system, how to create camper and family forms as well. So for the first part of this webinar, I'm going to run through advanced reports, so your reporting system. So advanced reports within CampSite is probably the most widely used tool within CampSite because it allows you to report on almost every piece of information within CampSite. So to access your reporting system, you'd want to first go up to your navigation bar up at the top and scroll all the way down to advanced reports. Go ahead and do that. And then this is where you'd be able to begin to create a report within CampSite. So the first thing you'll notice up at the top of this page is Save Reports. So you are able to save any of the reports that you create within CampSite just in case you need it at a later time and don't want to have to recreate it every single time. So that's Saved Reports up here. And I'll go over how to save your reports later on within this webinar. So to create a brand new report within CampSite, you'd want to first choose the enrollment year that you wish to report on. So this reflects each of your enrollment years within CampSite. So the more years you have with us, the more years you'll be able to report on. So I have quite a few years within my database. By default, the system will always set you to your current year, which is 2021 in my database right now. So once you've selected your enrollment year, the next step is to choose what campers you wish to appear on your report. So that's where sessions and statuses come into play. So if you need to report on campers who are currently enrolled in that camp year in a specific session, you'd want to go down to sessions right here. So this allows you to focus specifically on enrolled campers. So the first step would be to decide what session you wish to include and either type them in here, which I'm going to show you how to do right now. So let's say, for example, I would like to report on campers who are currently enrolled in a session in my 2021 year called week 1, so my first week of summer camp. So all I would need to do is type in the first 3 characters of that session name and then look through that list. So I have quite a few results matching those characters. So I'm just going to focus on week 1 right now. So from there, it's going to present me with all the campers that are currently enrolled in that particular session. So I have 66 campers. So those results reflect how many campers are currently enrolled in that particular session right there. So that's one way that you could do it. You can simply type in the name of the first 3 characters of the session name, or, which is a little bit easier, you can simply just click on sessions here. It'll give you a list of all of your sessions within that year. You can simply just sort of cherry pick which sessions you wish to report on. So week 2, maybe I want to include that one, week 3, and then you can see my results are now increasing because now I'm incorporating enrolled campers in these additional sessions here. So week 5, 6, 7, and 8. So now I can see that I have a total of 100 campers currently enrolled in one or more of these sessions here. So if you decide to include more than one session in your report, those campers will appear by default only one time in this report, regardless of how many sessions they may be enrolled in. So if they're enrolled in more than maybe all of these or one, they still will appear in this report one time regardless. And again, later on, I'm going to go over how to expand on those results a bit more in case you needed to do that. So that's how you'd be able to include enrolled campers in your report. So let's say you needed to report on a list of all of your enrolled campers in a certain enrollment year. The way you would do that is you would select all of your sessions in that report. So it's casting a wide net of every single session, and it'll give you the number of campers currently enrolled, so total enrolled campers in a specific year. So that's how you'd be able to do that. So again, sessions are enrolled campers, but let's say you wanted to maybe also include campers who are not enrolled yet and who have a different status. So that's where statuses below come in down here. So again, you could either type in the first 3 characters of the status, or you can simply click on statuses here. It will present you with a window in which you'd be able to choose what campers you wish to include in that report. So maybe I want to include leads. So I'm going to have quite a few more leads than I do have enrolled campers. So my results have increased quite significantly here. And if you happen to create any custom statuses for your unenrolled campers, which I believe was discussed in our phase 2, you'll be able to select them from this list as well. So you can also just include additional statuses. Maybe I also want to see what campers who were canceled as well. Or if I wanted to include all of my unenrolled campers, which would be pretty much every single one of my statuses here. So I can select all. So now it's giving me quite a bit more results here, so 1,004. So now that I've selected all of my sessions and all of my statuses, this would be how you'd be able to report on all of your camper accounts within your database. So maybe you were curious to see how many total camper accounts, regardless of if they were enrolled or unenrolled, you'd want to select all of your sessions and all of your statuses. So right now I have about 1,004, so quite a few. So you can also report on campers who are not enrolled at all. So maybe you wanted to see what campers or families you wanted to follow up with. You can choose to deselect your sessions here. So that's a common report that some camps like to build or admin like to build to see what campers have not been enrolled yet in that year. So that's a common report that gets built. So for this particular example, I'm going to focus my attention on enrolled campers. So as I mentioned before, statuses are unenrolled campers, so I'm going to take away those statuses and then focus primarily on my sessions. So I'm going to select all of my sessions to cast me a wide net of every single enrolled camper. So now that I have my list of campers here, I'll be able to see the fields of information that are provided to me. By default, the system gives me last name and first name, and it's going to be arranged in alphabetical order by last name. So I can see Jillian Alvarado, Lena Alvarado, they're at the top, but you can always reverse this order if you wanted to maybe do the reverse or the opposite by simply clicking on the header. So now it's starting with the latest letter in the alphabet. You could also do that with first name. I could do it in alphabetical order, reverse that order. So you could rearrange your fields, any one of your fields that you may add by simply clicking on the header. So that's how you'd be able to rearrange that. And you can also rearrange the columns as well. So by default, last name will always be the first column and first name will be the second column. So if you wanted to rearrange those columns, you can simply click on the 3 gray bars next to that field, click on it, and then move it into the placement that you wish it to be in. So I move first name above last name, so now first name is first. So I'm going to keep it the way that it is right now. I like the way that it's arranged, but I want to add some additional fields to my report. So that's where this section comes into play. So add fields. So to add them, you would just simply click on the link at the very top here. And then you'll be presented with a series of different tabs that represent the different pieces of information that you can include within your report. So quite a bit of options here. You could include camper information. I'm going to read through a couple of these: age, school, gender, things like that. Also, we have a section for family info. If you wanted to include maybe the parents or the primary family address, phone numbers, email address. So quite a bit of information. If I scroll to the top, also enrollment information as well. It's going to be subdivided by enrollment year. So you can look back at past years as well. In general enrollment info, the first enrollment date, enrollment question responses, enrollment option question responses. So you can report on that if needed. Bunking board information, if your camp has added on transportation and medical, you'll be able to report on that information as well through advanced reports. So financial, family camper notes. So a lot of information you can pull from here. So I'm going to go ahead and add a couple of things here just to demonstrate how you'd be able to add those fields into your report. So there's no limit on how many fields. So I'm going to go ahead and just stick with some basic camper info. So I'm going to go ahead and just check off age. So I want to include age within my report. I'm going to check that off. And maybe I want to see their school as well. So I'm going to check that off. And then you'll see below this window that those fields have been added to that report here. And you probably noticed while I was doing this, a unique icon that appears next to a few of these fields. So for example, sibling, first name, you'll notice a green two-pronged arrow, which kind of looks like a little fork next to it. So this particular icon here indicates that there may be more than one value associated with that field for a camper. So for example, with sibling first name, a camper may have more than one sibling, but they can't have more than one first name. So that's pretty much what it represents here. So I'm going to go over the benefit of that icon and what it actually does. So I'm going to go ahead and select one of those fields with that icon next to it to sort of demonstrate what it does. So I'm actually going to pick a different one here. I'm going to go into enrollment, and there was one field that had it that I wanted to include, which is session name right here. So a camper may be enrolled in more than one session in a year, so that's why that icon is there. So I'm going to go ahead and just click on the box next to that box. And now it's going to add all that information for all of my campers in that report. So I can see here that quite a few campers are enrolled in multiple sessions, and that information is kind of clumped up in the cell to the very right of that camper. So Jillian Alvarado, she's enrolled in 2 sessions here, after school program fall Fridays and after school program fall semesters Mondays. But she's only listed in this report one time, so one row. If I wanted to expand on this information a bit further, I would just scroll up or actually go up to add fields, locate that icon, which right now is gray, next to session name, and I'm going to double click on that. So keep an eye on Jillian here. I'm going to click on it until it turns green. And then now we can see here that Jillian is listed twice, so one time per value. So there's a couple of other campers. So Lena Alvarado was enrolled in 3 sessions, so 3 values, so 1 row per value. So that pretty much allows you to expand on that information. It also kind of cleans it up and makes it a little bit easier to read as well. But it does also include your results, of course, since that represents also rows in the report. So to remove this functionality, if you no longer needed it, you would just simply click on that icon one more time until it turns gray. So that is sort of our expansion icon. It allows you to expand on any fields within your report. So another popular feature within advanced reports is your ability to group your campers by a specific field. So you probably notice next to the delete button here, so this is where you'd be able to delete a field if needed. You'll see an icon that looks like really faint gray squares right here. So this field here is your grouping icon. This allows you to group your campers by specific fields. So let's say, for example, I wanted to see all my ages or all my age groups grouped together instead of having to kind of scroll through each one. I can simply locate that age field and double click on that icon here. It's going to become bold, kind of a bold black, and now it's going to group my campers by that field, which in my case is age. So I can see all of my 7-year-olds, all my 8-year-olds, and 9-year-olds, and 10, etc. So once you've enabled grouping controls, you'll have a new section above your list here, which allows you to show and hide certain groups, and also allows you to create page breaks if you decide to print this information. So there's going to be check boxes next to each of your groups, allowing you to decide which groups you actually want to include in that printout. So maybe I don't need 7-year-olds or 8-year-olds. I can deselect those boxes when I print this out. And I'll go over how to print out reports later on within this training. So that's grouping controls. You can also group by additional fields as well. So let's say, for example, I wanted to see them based on age and school that they're attending. I can double click on that icon again. So it just adds an extra layer of grouping within your report if you happen to need to do that. So 7-year-olds in Rosehood Elementary, Thomas Jefferson Elementary, can just adds another layer of grouping if needed. So if you needed to remove this functionality, you can just simply double click on it until it turns light gray. So I'm actually going to remove both of these functionalities. And I think I may delete session name. So as mentioned, the red dot represents the delete button. So I'm just going to delete that field. And I'm just going to keep age and school because that's all I really need. So once you've reviewed your report, you can also choose to narrow down your results if needed. So right now I'm looking at every single enrolled camper since I added all of my sessions. But let's say, for example, I wanted to look at a specific age or a specific grade level of campers. That's where add filters come in. So for this report, let's say hypothetically I need a report to focus on campers ages 8 through 10. I would use that add filters button up at the top to add a filter to narrow down my results. So once I click on that, I'm going to see the same series of different tabs that we saw earlier when I was adding fields, but now the system is asking me, what do I want to filter my report down by? So I can filter down by gender, maybe if I only want to see female or male, maybe a certain school. But in my case, I simply just need to see a specific age range of campers. So I'm going to check that off. So right on the left-hand side here. And then now it's going to ask me to set the criteria of that filter. So each filter is going to have a different criteria depending on what the field is. In my case for age, I have the option to set a filter that is between a certain age, not between a certain age, is blank, where the camper doesn't even have an age listed, and is not blank, where the camper has an age but not a specific age. So in my case, it just is between. And I'm going to set that criteria. So minimum age is 8 and maximum age is 10. You also have an or option. So maybe I want the system to also look for 12 through 15-year-olds, things like that. I could do that as well. But I'm just going to focus on 8 through 10-year-olds. I'm going to go ahead and add that filter in. So now it's going to only present me with campers between those ages. So you can see my results decreased significantly because now it's focusing on those ages. And as I mentioned, you could rearrange the order by clicking on the header. So now I can see it in numerical order, 8 through 10. And you can add additional filters, as many as you need, but just keep in mind the more filters you add, the less results you're going to get, just because each camper has to meet each of those filter criteria to appear on that report. So that is add filters if you needed to do that. And you can also delete those filters as well by double clicking on that red dot if needed. So now that I've added my fields and all the filters I need, now we can save this report. I mentioned you can search for save reports. I'm going to go over how you'd be able to save any reports that you happen to create. So again, just saves you some time so you don't have to constantly keep recreating a report. So to save this report, I'm going to go ahead and select Save As up at the very top of my page. So this is how you'd save a new report. So I'm just going to create a unique name for it. So I'm going to put the year, so that way I know what enrollment year it's for. I'm going to type in campers ages 8 through 10. And then I'm going to set a category to assign it to. So save reports can be categorized by different categories. That way it helps sort of navigate and identify your reports a little bit easier. I'll go over how to create those categories in just a bit. But for now, I'm just going to select a category that I currently have available to me. So I'm just going to put this one in standard reports for now, and then I'm going to hit Save Reports. A little confirmation bubble should appear. So when saving your reports within CampSite, you'd want to keep in mind that CampSite doesn't necessarily save the results as is. The system just saves the parameters that you've set for it. So the filters, the fields, the sessions, the statuses that you've added, just because it allows you to, or allows the system to automatically update the report if any updates were made after the report was created. So for example, if a camper between the ages of 8 through 10, so any camper who meets my parameters, in this case, that age group, and they're enrolled, if they enroll tomorrow or the next day, the next time that I open up that report, that camper will be added in there. So it's constantly updating in real time. So if you need to make any changes to existing reports, you'd want to hit Save right here. So Save As is if you want to save a brand new report, or if you want to create a copy of an existing report. To make changes to a report without creating a copy of it, you'd want to hit Save here. So that's the difference between these two right here. So you can also view basic information about a report by clicking Info. You can see the name, which you can edit. You can delete the reports, save changes, and view when it was created. So that is how to view that information there. So the next thing that I wanted to cover is subscribing to a report. So subscribe is a feature in which you'd be able to get emailed either daily, weekly, or monthly with a list of all the new campers that may have been added to your report. So you do have that option to subscribe yourself to a report. So let's say, for example, I wanted to subscribe myself to this particular report here. I would simply click on subscribe, and I would switch this setting to yes here. And then now I can set the frequency. So whether I want to be emailed daily, weekly, or monthly. So let's say I just want to be emailed weekly. And then from here, since it's weekly, I can pick the day of the week. So I'm going to set it to Monday. Maybe I want to be emailed every morning at 9 a.m. And then this is where you'd be able to set the subscription date range. So the date range in which you wish to continue to receive this email. So we highly recommend for admin who subscribe to a report to actually set a date range here, as opposed to keeping it open-ended. If you keep it open-ended, the system will continuously email you even after camp is over. So a good date range would be maybe the start of camp or the start of the enrollment year to maybe the end of summer, or whenever you need it, or whenever you no longer need it. So I'm just going to actually set this to, say, the beginning of my enrollment year or beginning of my summer. And I'm going to set this to August. And then I can update that subscription here. So now I'll get email within those parameters, so daily or weekly every Monday at 9. So you'd also want to keep in mind with that particular feature is that you can only subscribe yourself to a report. You can't subscribe other users to a report for them. Later on, I'm going to go over a quick little workaround in which you'd be able to invite other users to actually subscribe to a report if you needed them to do so. So that is subscribe. The next thing I wanted to cover here is permissions. So you noticed to the very left of subscribe, there is a permissions button here. So before I dive into that, with your saved reports, each of those reports are protected by their own set of permission levels. So this allows the creator to grant certain permissions to a certain report, so who they want to have access to that report. So by default, the creator of that report and the user who saved it is the owner of that report. So they would be the only user that would be able to make changes to that report, delete anything, add anything. They would be the only one with those permissions. But maybe they wanted to grant permissions to other individuals or other users to be able to do that as well. Permissions is where you'd be able to grant that. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. a little window will appear with all of the users in your database. So by default, everybody else or every other user is only going to have read-only permission. So they can only view it. They can't necessarily add anything to it or make any changes. So here is where you'd be able to control who does what or whether they can access it or not. So let's say, for example, John here, I wanted to also give him the ability to change things and add things. I can switch his read-only permission to admin. Maybe I also want Matthew here to also be able to do that as well. I could switch his permission level as well. And let's say, for example, maybe there's a certain user in your database who you don't want to have access to that report. You can simply deselect their name by deselecting that box next to their name. So I'm going to deselect Greg here. Let's say I don't want him to have access to it. Maybe I don't want Sarah to have access to it either. And I can review these permissions and I can update them at the bottom. So that's how you'd be able to manage your report permissions. So again, by default, the owner or the creator of that report who saved it is going to be the only user who has admin permissions unless it's changed here or either in Advanced Reports Management. So I'm going to go over that right now. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Advanced Reports Management. And within this page, you'll be able to get an overview of all of the reports you currently have access to. So I can see the name of those reports, my permission level, and also restrictions. So within CampSite, you have the ability to restrict an enrollment option or a form to a report. So only those people who either appear on that report or don't appear on that report will be able to see those forms or those options. So if any of your reports are being used in those restrictions, you'll be able to see them here in this column. So right now, none of my reports are being used as a restriction. So it's just telling me none here. So I can see I have admin permission. So if you have admin permission for any of your reports here, which I do for all of them, this is also where you'd be able to manage, you'd always also be able to manage permissions here as well. So let's say I wanted to manage permissions for this Camp Firewood assignments. I can simply double click on the yellow lock next to the name, and I can also manage permissions here. Additionally, here as well. And I can do that for any one of the reports I have admin permissions for. And you can also edit the name and the category of that report by double clicking on the pencil icon here. So I can change the name of that report and also change the category as well if I needed to do that. So within this page is also where you'd be able to add those report categories that I discussed. So to add additional categories or to add new ones, if you don't already have any, you would select Add New Category up at the top and then add the name of that report category here. So that's how you'd be able to do that. Additionally, on this page, you have the Mass Permission Changes option up at the top here, the top right. So this is where you'd actually be able to add and remove permissions for a user for multiple reports at one time, as opposed to having to kind of click through each report one by one. You can change permission levels in mass for multiple reports. So let's say that I needed to do that. I'm going to go ahead and click on that button up in the top right here. And then a new little section is going to appear below. It's asking me now whether I want to add permissions or remove them. So let's say, for example, I wanted to add permissions for a user for multiple reports. I'd want to first select those reports. So maybe I have a new staff member, I want to give that person access. I can click on them individually or simply select all. And then now I'd want to hit add permissions, choose the user. So maybe Dan, or maybe Dan here is a new staff member, and I want to give him admin only permission. I would just choose that from that drop down. So keep in mind, if any of your users here have permissions already set for them for any of these reports, it's going to be overridden with the new permission level that you set here. So it's going to leave you with a little reminder here just in case before you do it. So I'm going to go ahead and add these for Dan here. So now Dan has admin permissions for all of those selected reports that I've added. So you could also do the opposite. You can also remove permissions en masse. Same steps, you would just select those reports, click on remove permissions, and then choose the user here. So that's how you'd also be able to remove permissions as well. So that is mass permission changes. So we are about halfway through, so I'm going to go ahead and take a quick little break here to review any new questions, or if you have any questions, feel free to type them in now. Now just break here for just a minute. Okay, it doesn't look like we have any questions that have come in, but again, feel free to type in any questions you have in the questions section, and I'll check periodically throughout the rest of the training if you have any questions that you've added. So I'm going to go ahead and continue on. So for the last portion of our advanced report section in this webinar, I'm going to cover the toolbar that you probably noticed in the report. So it's additional tools that you'll be able to utilize with your reports. So to do that, I'm going to go back to my advanced reports page by simply hovering over campers and then selecting advanced reports. Oops, I think I missed a couple questions actually. So I'm going to take a quick break here before I continue into the toolbar. I think I missed a couple questions here. I apologize. So we have one question here. Can you go over the restrictions feature again in regards to the advanced report section? Yeah, so Geneva, I can send you an email how to go over that. It's a little bit more in depth, so I can go ahead and send you an email about how to apply restrictions for both enrollment options as well as forms. So forms we're actually going to cover today, so I can cover that for you. So how to restrict forms by report. So I'll cover that. But as far as enrollment options, I can send you a quick little email on how to do that. So. And another question we have here, we have a big staff change, so reports that were generated by others. How would I gain access to those reports so that we can clean up our reports? That's a great question, yeah. So if you have a staff change and some of the creators of those reports no longer are there, you can let us know. You can call support or send us an email and we can help grant you admin permissions to any of the reports that were made by staff that are no longer there. So you can just send us a quick email, give us a list of those reports, and we can help you grant permissions to those who need it. So, okay, so any other questions? So I'm going to take a quick pause. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and continue on here. Again, feel free to use that question section as much as you want if you have any questions that come up. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and go over the toolbar. So if I hover over campers up at the very top here, I'm going to go back into, actually I'm already there, so that's perfect. So while I'm here, I'm going to go over the saved reports feature. So this is where you'd be able to access your saved reports. So I want to focus on that report that we saved together, that campers ages 8 through 10. So I'm going to go ahead and either type that name of that report in the search bar. So that's one way you'll be able to search for a report, or you can simply scroll through that, that list here. So if you have a lot of reports, that search bar is really helpful, but I can see that save reports here, or that save report that we did together. And it's going to give me that same report with any new results that may have come up. So nothing's changed here. So I'm going to cover this toolbar here. So the first thing you have in this toolbar is going to be refresh. So if you were working on this report and you wanted to maybe see if anything's changed, you can simply hit refresh. So pretty straightforward. The next thing we have here is going to be print. So if you need to generate a PDF copy of this report to print out, you can do that by clicking on this button here. And next we have email. So this particular feature within Advanced Reports allows you to email families en masse here. So you'd want to first generate the list of families you wish to email and then select email here. So you have two options when sending an email en masse through Advanced Reports. You can either send an email on a family level, and you can also send it on a camper level as well. So the difference between these two, it's listed here. If you choose on a family level, it's going to send that email that you generate or you compose one time per family. So this is a common option here. And next you have the option to send it on a camper level. So with this particular option, it's going to send that email one time per camper. So if the camper or the family has 5 campers, it's going to send that email 5 times to the parents. You can also choose to include campers as recipients if they have a camper email on file. And this is also the option in which you'd be able to merge camper data into the email if you needed to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and dive into sending a mass email on a family level really quickly here. So there's a couple of differences sending emails en masse as opposed to sending them individually to a family. Your recipient list is going to be pretty long here. It's going to have more than one parent there just because we're sending them now en masse. And you also have the option to reset parent dashboard passwords from this page. So this function is really helpful for all of our newer camps who may have imported existing family and camper data into their system. So instead of families having to create their accounts themselves, you can import it, and then you'd want to, of course, give them the information to log into the parent dashboard. So this is a great feature to be able to get them that information. So you would generate the email, click on Reset Parent Dashboard Passwords, and then choose the parents that you wish to reset it for, and then send them an email. So what would happen is that the parents would get this original email or this initial email, and then a secondary email with their login information. So that's a pretty common use case of resetting parent dashboards en masse here. So that's there if you need it. But every other functionality is going to be the same as if you were emailing the family individually. So same options. I'm going to go ahead and close out of this. And I'm going to go on to our next feature, which is scheduled emails. So this is a relatively new feature within CampSite. So this allows you to schedule an email to be sent at a later time and date. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this. So with this particular feature, you'd want to keep in mind that in order to use it, you must have a saved email and saved report already created. So you would choose the email type, so per family, per camper, and then choose the content type, so marketing and informational. So marketing, just to reiterate, is an email that's promotional related. Informational is going to be need to know information or content. So I'm just going to select marketing, and then you would select that save email that you wish to send them. So early bird, and then you can choose the date. So maybe I want this to be sent on the 31st there and at noon. And I can choose the parents that I want to send this to, BCC any individuals or any recipients, and then I would click on schedule email here. And once you've scheduled those emails, they'll all be housed within your scheduled emails page, which you can also access up here. Scheduled camper emails, if it's a camper email, scheduled family emails, if it's a scheduled family email. So I'm going to go ahead and just quickly schedule that for the end of the month. It's going to let me know that it's been scheduled and there's no action on your part needed. It's going to automatically send that email for you on that date and on that time. If you wanted to review those emails, I mentioned there is a place where you'd be able to do that. And to access it later on, you would just go to admin. And depending on what kind of email it'll be, it's either going to be in campers or families, depending on the email. And it's going to be under saved emails. So if it's a camper saved email that's scheduled, it's going to be up here in scheduled camper emails. And then I can see any emails that have been yet to be sent and all emails that have already been sent. So this is a new feature that we've added. And I do see a question that came in from Geneva, so I'm going to go ahead and check on that. Was the bug with scheduled sending to those who opted out fixed? So that, I believe, is still in the works. I can double check on that for you, Geneva, and see what the status of that is. I believe it has been, but I will double check just to clarify, because there was a bug initially found with those who opted out. I believe a marketing emails was the initial bug. So I'll double check that for you as well. And I'll include that in the follow-up email that I have for you that goes over enrollment option restrictions. Okay, so that is scheduled emails. So I'm going to go back to my report here by hovering over campers, going to advanced reports. And I'm going to go back into that saved email here. Okay, so the next tool that we have within this report is going to be text message here. So this option here has to do with our texting module, which allows admin to text parents using text credits. So if you have any text credits, this is where you'd be able to send families a text in mass. So it works very much like sending an email in mass. So if you're interested in learning more about text, if you don't already have it, you can contact us in support and we'll be happy to go over a quick little demo with you on how texting works if you're interested. So the next option in the toolbar is going to be export to CSV. So if you needed to export this report to a Excel spreadsheet, you can do that here pretty easily. And then the next thing we have, or a tool we have, is going to be the share button, or the share option here. So this is where you'd be able to share this report with other users who have access to that report. So it essentially emails that user and lets them know a report has been shared with them and a link to access that report within CampSite. So let's say, for example, I wanted to send John an email. I wanted to share this with him. I can check off his name, and then I have the option to attach a spreadsheet and also send a copy to myself if needed. So I can also add a message as well. So I mentioned earlier, you can't subscribe other users to a report, but this is a good little trick to invite someone to subscribe to that report themselves. So let's say I want John here to subscribe to this report. I can go ahead and include in the message, please subscribe to this report. And then I can hit share report. And then John there will get an email with that message and a little link to access that report. So that is share. The next tool that we have within this list is going to be documents. So documents here refer to custom PDFs that you can create within CampSite on your admin page. So if you happen to create any documents, you would be able to generate them in mass here. So those PDFs allow you to merge in information about families and campers, and also allows you to customize the size of the PDF. So you can generate those in mass here. And next we have labels. So very similar to documents, except these are going to be more geared towards mailing labels. So if you needed to mail anything to these families and you needed to generate labels, you can do so by clicking on this button here. So we provide you with a mailing label that's sized at a default 5160 mailing label size with the family's last name and also their primary address there. If you wanted to change that information or add to it, or even create brand new labels, you could do that on your admin page as well, and you can generate them here if needed. So that's labels. It's helpful if you happen to send an email to families. The next tool that we have within this list is going to be notes. So in the phase 2 webinar, we went over camper profiles, and within their profile, there was a tab for camper notes in which you can add any camper related notes to their profile. If you at any point need to add a camper note to multiple campers at one time, as opposed to going into each one of them, you can generate a report of those campers and then simply hit notes here. And like save reports, you can categorize camper notes as well. So you would just simply select the category and then type in the note, and then it's going to be automatically added to their profiles there. So just makes it a little bit easier and saves a bit of time. And so that is camper notes. The next tab we have is family map. So this option here allows you to actually pinpoint where the families are. So it's going to bring up a Google map, and you can see where the families are based on their primary address. So it's just like the family radar that was discussed in phase 2, except it focuses and targets only specific families in this report. So that's family map. That feature is integrated with Google Maps. And next we have photos here. So if you ever needed to print out profile photos of campers in mass, you could generate a report of those campers and click on photos here. And the system will send you a zip file with those photos in the desired size, so small or large photos. And then if I go to the next option here, which is going to be edit, I can click on that. So this particular feature here allows you to mass edit particular fields within your report instead of having to go through them one by one. You can actually edit those fields directly within that report itself. So some of the fields may be grayed out. For example, in this case, age. That is because some pieces of information within CampSite are actually tied to different functionalities in different parts of the database, so it's locking in that information from being changed. But in this case, I can change the school here. So I'm going to go ahead and check that box and demonstrate how you'd be able to mass edit things. So I'm going to select that and then enable editing. It's going to let you know right away that you're in edit mode here, and it's going to open up that field there so you can make changes. So I'm going to go ahead and just click on this field here next to Kareem Adams, and I'm going to type in the value I wish to change it to. So CampSite school, I can do the same thing for any one of these campers here. You also have the option to set all rows to the same value. So maybe I know that every single one of these campers goes to CampSite school. Instead of having to go through it one by one, I can simply click on set all rows to the same value, check the box next to that field, type in the new value, and hit set all rows. It's going to automatically change that value for me. And then you'd want to save your changes once you're done here. So none of these changes will go into effect until you hit save changes. So you'd want to make sure to do that. And let's say you made a mistake and you wanted to remove these changes, you can simply hit discard changes up at the top to reset that report back to its original state. So that's mass edit. If you ever need to do that, it'll update that for you automatically in their profiles as well. Okay, so the next option we have is going to be mass transactions. So this has to do with financials. So if you ever needed to post transactions in mass for any families or campers within your report, you'll be able to do that using this option here. So you'd be able to post mass charges, discounts, payments, refunds and credits, and you'll also be able to choose the mode, per camper or per family. And of course, you'd want to set it to the correct financial year. Here. So if you are interested in learning more about the differences between these transactions, our webinar next week, I believe it's next Wednesday, goes over financials. If you're interested in learning a little bit more about financials and the different types of transactions we offer. Okay, the next option we have is going to be missing forms. So this particular feature here is really helpful if you offer or if you require forms from parents to fill out. This allows you to report on campers who are missing forms. So I'm going to go ahead and select that. And it's going to take me to a brand new page here. It's going to show me the campers who are currently missing forms, give me their first name and last name, how many forms they're missing, and what forms they're missing. So the exact forms bulleted here. So I can scroll through this list and see quite a few of my campers are missing a lot of forms. And you can also email these families as well to let them know to get those forms in as soon as possible. So that's a really helpful tool if you require forms. You can kind of help families get reminded of what forms they need to fill out. You can also print this list out as well. It's going to generate a PDF that you can print out and also export this missing forms report to an Excel spreadsheet. So that is missing forms. So I'm going to go back to my reports by going into advanced reports here, and I'm going to go over the remaining tools that we have. 2021 campers ages 8 through 10. And then the last option we have is going to be statements here. So this particular tool here allows you to download statements for a given financial year for all the families within that report. So you can choose the year, and then the system will send you a zip file with all of those statements, and you can print them out, maybe hand them off to parents, or if your accounting team maybe needs them, this would allow you to do that for families. I'm going to go ahead and close out of that. So that pretty much covers the toolbar within Advanced Reports. So now that we've covered Advanced Reports, I'm going to go ahead and dive into camper and family forms. So this is how you'd be able to create those if you needed to. So with our forms feature, there's two types of forms that you can actually create. So I mentioned camper forms and family forms. So camper forms are going to be forms that are requested for each camper in the family, whereas family forms are going to be requested once per family. So I'm going to go over camper forms first, and it's going to be very similar to family forms, and I'll touch on those after I cover camper forms. So to create camper forms, what you'd want to do is go up to the top of the page here and then click on camper forms. So this would be your camper forms sort of dashboard, and within camper forms there are three types of forms that you could create. So there are permanent forms that you could create, yearly forms, and session forms. So permanent forms are going to be forms that parents only need to fill out for their camper one time. So the first year they fill it out, they no longer have to fill it out moving forward. And yearly forms, the most common form, are filled out annually, every single enrollment year. And next we have session forms, which are going to be session-specific forms. So if they sign up for a particular session, only they will be presented with that particular form. So that's the difference between these two here. So I'm going to go ahead and help you create or go over how to create a form. So once you've decided on the type of camper form that you wish to create, you want to select Add New Form. So I'm going to go ahead and help you create a yearly form, which is the most common. It's going to work the same way as permanent and session forms here. But in this case, it's going to be presented to them every single year that they enroll. So I'm going to go ahead and select that link down below. And now I'm going to go through this information. So I'm going to go through this step by step. So the first step, pretty straightforward, is to create a name for that particular report, form. So let's say I need to create a field trip permission slip. Maybe my campers go on a yearly field trip every single year, and I want to create a form for that. I'm just going to type in field trip permission slip. And then the next step is to choose a type of form that it's going to be. So here I have two options, web and printed. So web forms are going to be forms that parents fill out straight from their web browser. They'll be able to submit it through their web browser, and you'll be able to report on responses to web forms. The next option we have is going to be printed. So printed forms are going to be forms in which you'd have to provide a blank file or a blank document for parents to download, print out, fill out, and then upload back in. So quite a bit more steps. You would upload that document here, and then parents would be able to go on and upload it there. So it requires a little bit more steps, as I mentioned. So it's good for things where maybe you require a physical signature from a parent. That would be a good example of an actual printed form there. You probably noticed when I selected printed, a new setting popped up down below, which is download only. So with this particular setting here, if there is any piece of information or printed information that you want to allow for parents to download, so you would upload it and then parents can download it. They don't necessarily need to upload it back in. You can make it download only. So it's for things like handbooks. A good example that I've seen are a camp checklist, so items that they need to bring. Again, parents can download it, but they don't have the option to upload it back in. So that is download only. So I'm going to go ahead and actually go through building a web form, since that's the most common. So I'm going to switch this type to web, and I'm going to move on to the next step, which is due date. So this is optional. You don't have to enter a due date for a form. It's just a good way to encourage parents to get the form in at a certain time. So they can still submit the form even after the due date. So even after that's expired. So I'm just going to leave that blank for right now. And then the next setting is going to be active. So this is going to be whether you want this form to be presented to parents right away. So it's going to be a universal feature or setting that you've seen throughout CampSite, but with forms specifically, the active setting is always going to be set to no by default, just because it's protecting that form from being seen by parents and filled out before you even finalize it. So it's kind of protecting that form. And then you can come back to your settings once you finalized it, added your questions, and then set it to yes and make it active. So I'm going to go ahead and just leave it set to no. And then the next setting here is going to be editable. So this setting here allows you to control whether you want to allow parents to make changes to the form after they've initially submitted it. So if this is set to no, their information is locked in and only admin can make changes to form responses to this form. But if you want them to be able to go in, make edits, you can set this to yes. So I'm going to actually keep it set to no for now. I don't want them to make any changes to this form without me knowing. And the next setting is going to be notify on submit. So here is where you have the ability to choose whether you want users to be notified every time this form has been submitted by a parent. So when reviewing this particular setting, you'd want to keep in mind that this permission here, or that this setting is actually connected to an email notification option that we have available. So for those of you who did not attend the first webinar when we went over user settings, there is a notification you can turn on the admin page that allows users to get notified when camper forms are submitted. So I'm going to go ahead and quickly run over that. I go into DB management here, and I go into John's information, and I double click on those three dots. If I scroll down towards his email notifications, and select the triangle next to campers, there's going to be a camper forms option there. So that allows them to get emailed every time a camper form is submitted. So that works in conjunction with that setting for each form. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to my forms page. And I think I might have closed out of that. So I'm just going to rebuild it quickly. So I'm just going to do field trip. And then this is a setting that it goes in conjunction with. So you want to keep in mind that this is a global setting. So if this is set to yes, all of the users who have that camper forms email notification turned on will get an email every time that particular form is submitted. So it's a global setting that applies to all users who have that enabled for them. So the next setting here that I wanted to go over is going to be category. So category here allows you to categorize your different forms for parents. So it allows them to easily identify the different forms that they have to fill out. So this is going to be more specifically organization for parents, for families. So when they log into the parent dashboard and go into their forms page, or when they go through the enrollment form on the forms page, all of those forms are going to be categorized by the categories that you create. So not necessarily internal organization, more so a way for you to organize those forms for parents. So I'll go over how to create those categories in just a minute. So I have a few, I think I have one here that I want to assign it to. So I have trip forms, which is perfect. This is a field trip permission slip. So I'm gonna go ahead and set that to that, but I can always change that at a later time. And next we have restriction. So I think one of you had a question about report restrictions. So this is where you'd be able to apply a restriction for a particular form. So you can have it so a form either appears to only people who are on a report or appears to people who do not appear on a certain report. So that's how you'd be able to do that. So let's say, for example, with this field trip permission slip, this field trip, this annual field trip is only available for campers who are between the ages of 8 through 10. So if you remember, we built that report together that grouped campers between those ages. I can actually use that report now as a restriction for this form, since this form is only needs to be presented to those people or those campers. So in this case, I want it to appear to those people who appear on that report. So I'm going to select that option. And then now it's asking me what report I wish to use. So in this case, it's that report we created together, 2021 campers ages 8 through 10. So now with these parameters, this form will only be presented to parents of campers who are on that report, or parents of these campers, so ages 8 through 10. So that's how you'd be able to apply a report restriction for forms specifically. Right, so the next setting we have here is going to be display during enrollment. So this particular setting is asking whether you wanted to include this form during the enrollment process. So when parents go in, they'll see this form on the form step when they go in to enroll. So you can do that. Let's say I wanted to include this form in that process. I can set that to yes, and then a secondary setting will appear in which I can require it. So they have to fill it out in order to proceed to submit the enrollment form. If this is set to no, that form will still exist to parents, but it's not going to be included in the enrollment process. They would actually have to physically click on the forms page in their nav bar to see that form. So a good way to kind of let them know that form exists is to include it during the enrollment process. So I'm actually going to make this form required. So I want parents to have to fill it out. So I'm going to keep it set to display during enrollment and required to enroll. So I'm going to go ahead and create that form. So you do that once you're done there. And then that form is going to be added to that section. So underneath my yearly forms there. Right now it's presented in italics just because it's currently inactive. Once it's active, it's no longer going to be in italics here. So once you've added those settings in there, the next step is to start adding your different questions to your forms. So I'm going to go ahead and add a few questions to my field trip permission slip. I'm going to do that by clicking on the name of that form. So this is where you would be able to add your different questions here. So you can add as many questions as you need. There's no limit really. And to do that, you would simply click on the Add New Questions link here, and then you'd be able to add that question in there. So a common way that camps like to start their forms is to add a header to the top of their form. So I'm going to go ahead and just copy and paste the name here. And then I'm going to make this a header. So these response types are going to mirror the response types for enrollment questions and all the other questions that we have within CampSite. So I'm going to go ahead and click on header. And I'm going to save changes. And I'm going to add another question here. So I mentioned that these response types mirror the response types in our other questions within CampSite, with the exception of one additional response option here. So multiple response here. So this particular response type is only going to be available in forms. So with drop-down list, this response option allows parents to pick a value from a drop-down list that you've created, but it only allows them to select one option or one value. With multiple response, this allows for parents to pick more than one value within a drop-down list. But again, this is only available within forms questions as of right now. So I'm going to go ahead and add a question to my list here, or to my form. Let's say I want to ask them for permission. Do you give your camper to attend this year's field trip? And I want this to be mandatory. So I'm going to check the box next to mandatory, and I'm going to choose a response type. In this case, it's a simple yes or no question. And then I'm going to go ahead and proceed to add a new question there. So a lot of the times, some camps like to add a signature at the bottom for parents to fill out. So they can do that by simply just typing in e-signature or just signature. Oops, I'm going to spell correct that. And then this is going to be mandatory. And then it's going to be a fill-in, which is small text. So they can add their name in there. And a lot of camps also add like a date. Maybe they want to see the date that it was signed. And I want this to be mandatory as well. And then I want this to be a date picker there. And then I can save my changes. So again, you can add as many questions as you need. You can also delete a question by clicking on the red dot. So keep in mind that you can only delete a question in a form if a parent has not answered it yet. So it's going to be locked in otherwise. And you can also rearrange the order by clicking on the 3 gray bars to the very left of the question and then moving them around. So you can always change the order of those if needed. So very important to save your changes at the very bottom once you're done. And once you've done that, you can also preview this form. So very important, again, to save your changes and not go straight to preview this form. Otherwise, it's going to completely wipe out all of your questions in there. So I'm going to go ahead and click on preview this form, and I can see it with those response types in action. And I can go back to edit this form if needed. And I can go back to return to that Camper Forms dashboard if needed. So let's say I've completed this form and I'm pretty much done with it. I've added everything I needed to. I can just go back to that page and then I can set it to active. So as I mentioned, it's going to be set to inactive by default. And then once you're ready, added your questions, you can double click on the yellow pencil here to review those settings that we looked at together. And in this case, I just need to switch this active setting to yes. And then now it's going to no longer be in italics. So now it's live for those parents to fill out. So that's how you'd be able to create that form, create a form. Once you start getting submissions for forms, you'll notice underneath the number submit column, a count of how many parents have submitted it. So right now I have 7 submissions for this photo release here. And you can also download submissions for forms as well if you needed to. So if it's a printed form, you'll see a printer icon on the very left here. And I can double click on it to start printing those submissions or start generating downloadable copies of those submissions. I can set a filter for a submission date range if needed. I can choose the order, and I can also, lastly here, print them all out. And it's essentially going to download them for you on your computer, and then you can print it out from there. If it happens to be a printed form that you need to print out or generate submissions for, instead of a printer icon next to the name of that form, it's going to be a zip file icon. And then you can double click on that, and it's going to generate a zip file of all of those printed form submissions if you need those. So that's how you'd be able to do that, to download printable copies of forms. You can also preview that form. It's going to take you back to that page in which you'd be able to preview that form if needed again. So that's pretty much that. And you can also rearrange the form order, so how it's presented to parents, by simply clicking on these 3 gray bars here. So maybe I want camper info below the permission slip. I can do that as well. So that's how you'd be able to do that. So another feature that I wanted to go over here is a pretty helpful feature in camper forms, move or copy form. So this is where you'd be able to move a copy to a different form type. So let's say, for example, you created a form in the wrong spot, maybe a permanent form, but it's supposed to be a yearly form. Instead of having to recreate it, you can actually move it pretty easily using this feature. So all you would need to do is locate that form, click on Move or Copy Form above that section. Let's say maybe that photo release here was supposed to be a yearly form instead. I can switch it to cop or to move here. I have the option to keep my existing submissions that I already have. I would choose the form, the photo release. Do I want it to still be a camper form, or do I want it to be a family form now? I want it to be a camper form. And then destination scope, which is going to be the form type. So in this case, I want it to be a yearly form now. Since it's yearly, now I would need to pick the year, 2021. So if I hit submit, it's going to then move that photo release or that form into that new section or that new form type there. So that's how you'd be able to do that. So you probably noticed when I was showing you how to move that form, you also have the option to copy a form. So if I go back to move or copy form above that section, I can copy that form or copy any of my forms. So maybe you have forms that are very similar in format or in questions, you can copy it over and then make modifications to it if needed. So I'm going to go ahead and just quickly copy this. So all it really does is creates a duplicate of that same form there. So that's how you'd be able to do that. So move or copy form. So the last thing that I wanted to go over with forms today, or with camper forms, is going to be how you'd be able to manage those form categories. So I mentioned you can create categories for your forms. That way parents can easily see the different types of forms on their parent dashboard or on the enrollment form. And that would be done through Manage Form Categories up here at the top. So this is where you can see that trip forms that I used for my field trip permission slip. And this is also where you can add a new form category. So you'd simply click on that link at the top, add a name. So maybe I want to create a waivers category. Maybe I have a lot of waivers. I can add that in. I can see how many forms are assigned to that category. I can delete it if there's no forms in it. And I can also make changes or edits to the name by double clicking on that pencil. And again, that rearrange icon to the very left, you can click on and move around depending on how you want parents to see it. So that is camper forms there. So now that I've covered camper forms, I want to briefly go over family forms today. So family forms are going to be forms that are presented per family as opposed to per camper. So I'm going to go ahead and go to that page by hovering over campers and selecting family forms. So these forms are created pretty much the same way as camper forms. However, as I mentioned, they are only presented once per family, meaning once a parent submits it for the first camper, if they have multiple campers, they won't need to fill it out again when they enroll other campers in the family. So for family forms specifically, we only offer permanent and yearly form options because the session option isn't necessarily applicable to the family as a whole. So again, built the same way, you would choose the type of form and you would add new form, create the name, and then go through that list. So restrictions are also an option, report restrictions, and you can also move or copy family forms. And you can also manage form categories as well for family forms. So that pretty much wraps it for camper and family forms and also brings us to the very end of our phase 3 webinar. So thank you again, everyone, for taking the time to join me today. And feel free to hop off if you would like. I'm actually going to stick around for a few minutes and open the floor to any last minute questions and go over any questions that I may have missed during this training.